So to start this off, I'm not trying to say I don't want anybody to become a software engineer, but to be honest with you, there is some cons to becoming a software engineer. So what's up YouTube? My name is Kenny G, and if you're new to the channel, I'm an iOS engineer. In today's video, we're gonna be talking about the 5 reasons why I believe you shouldn't become a software engineer. So if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button, also hit the like button. It definitely helps out the channel. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So one of the main reasons I would say that you should not become a software engineer is honestly because of the money. So if you try to become a software engineer primarily only because of the money, I hate to say it, but you may be sadly disappointed. One of the major reasons is because a lot of people, they go on TikTok or social media and they just automatically hear that, every software engineer makes 6 figures. Not to say that software engineers don't make 6 figures, there are plenty that make 6 figures. But I think the other thing that people need to realize is that not every software engineer makes six figures, at least starting out. It takes you a while before you get there. Now, there are some companies that pay you 6 figures right out the gate, but every company just doesn't do that. Unless you work for some of the top tech companies. And what I mean by top tech companies, I'm talking about, Google, Facebook, Amazon, or some of the other top tech companies like, Instacart or Capital One, some of those type of companies, yes, they will be the ones to probably pay you some of those top dollars. But granted, those interviews are much, much harder than your other companies you may go with. That's kind of like more so a mom and pop type of company where, you may be a developer working on like a real estate application that they have or something like that. So it is very different. And, the money is usually the big factor for a lot of people. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say I didn't want to become a software engineer because of the money. Money was one factor of it, but there were many other things that I looked into that, made me want to become a software engineer. One of the major ones is I actually love writing code. I mean, I think even for me, and I know every engineer won't say this, but for me, even if I was a millionaire, I would still be a software engineer just because I love writing code just that much. And I know for a lot of people, they can't honestly say that. And because of that, there are some people that if you get into being a software engineer, you can't get burnt out. I mean, because let's be honest, you're writing code all day. And if you're somebody who honestly don't really care for writing code, you're really in the wrong career field. Some people think that, okay, I'm gonna just go through a boot camp, or I'm gonna get a computer science degree, or I'm gonna be self-taught, and I'm gonna just get these 6 figures and then that's it. And I hate to tell you this, but whatever you learn from like a boot camp, or even going to college, or even on your own, just to get hired, I hate to say it, but you pretty much only know I'll probably say maybe 30% of everything around being a software engineer. There are so many different areas of software engineering that you probably haven't even imagined to have a taste of. One thing, for instance, maybe just architecture. Architecture is one part of software engineering that you probably won't even grasp until after several years of experience. Before that, you're probably not even gonna touch it. Also, just having some of those other skills on leading other engineers. That's another big thing that you probably won't be able to get to until several years, or building out an application from scratch. Again, there's only like a small percentage you'll know becoming a software engineer. So once you do become one, there's a whole lot more things you'll have to eventually learn. And software engineering is always changing. Software changes every single year. New things come out that you have to learn, new techniques, new ways of doing something. So, you're always on the cutting edge of technology and making sure you know every single thing there is about that stack that you're using, or just in general about being a software engineer. And I feel like for most people, if you get into this and you go for it strictly for the money, you'll be weeded out quickly. Like it won't take you long before, you end up not being able to find a job, or unfortunately you lose the job that you have strictly because you're only there for the money and you're not trying to learn, or you're not trying to grow as a software engineer. So the next thing is you actually need to have problem solving skills. So what I mean by problem solving skills, I'm meaning more so around the fact that most people that become software engineers, in all honesty, there are people who love puzzles, love doing like games, as far as like trying to figure things out. If you're somebody who is really good at math, physics, or just have great problem solving skills, then obviously software engineering is for you. But there are a ton of people who just don't have good problem solving skills. If you don't have those skills, you're gonna struggle hard, because I would say 100% of programming is strictly pretty much solving problems. That's why Stack Overflow is mainly used, because you run into problems, you go to Stack Overflow, you see how someone solved the problem, and then you go ahead and use that solution and you try to, manipulate it a little bit so it works with whatever you have. Now, the further you get down the line, you'll eventually realize that in some cases, you won't be using Stack Overflow to solve every single problem you have. In a lot of cases, you're gonna have to be that engineer to figure out how to solve a problem on your own. Stack Overflow is great to at least get you in the right direction, but it's not gonna always be the greatest solution in solving a problem. So you need those problem solving skills to figure out, why isn't something working, how to make something work, how to figure out how to do something, and so forth. I can just say, just for me, there have been plenty of times where I've been given a task that has zero documentation and I'm the one that has to go in and try to figure out how to do something. I'll give a small example about it. So I used to work on the NBA app. I remember like it was yesterday, my lead came to me and said like, hey, Kenny, we want you to work on Chromecast for NBA. I'm like, all right, cool, no problem. Sat there, decided I was just gonna go online, look at the documentation for Chromecast, and then I was just gonna figure out how to get Chromecast integrated with our iOS application, and things should just work magically out the box. Yeah, that wasn't the case. Went online, looked at Chromecast documentation. Hate to say it, it just wasn't super intuitive. It wasn't extremely clear. I struggled with trying to figure out what the heck the documentation was even asking for. The documentation didn't really give me much leeway, especially for like iOS. Now, if you were doing something for like web, it was probably okay, but for iOS or mobile development in general, yeah, there's pretty much nothing. I had to go through, read things over and over again, test things out, figure it out. And mind you, only had like about, I think like a month to build out all of Chromecast for us and try to get things tested, fixed, and pushed out through production prior to Christmas, because this was around the time we wanted to get Chromecast up and going before Christmas. And yeah, I was the only engineer working on this. So me being the only engineer working on this, you can imagine that's a lot for one person to be working on Chromecast by themselves. There's not much documentation. I knew nothing about Chromecast prior, so I've never even worked with it before. And this is so we could be able to show all the games through Chromecast for users who had NBA League Pass. So it was a tough uphill battle for me. But again, it just goes to show that, by having those problem solving skills, I was able to take those problem solving skills and figure things out and get things to work. If you don't have problem solving skills, hate to say it, but you're gonna struggle a lot when it comes to actually becoming a software engineer. And one more piece I wanna add on to that. When it comes to having those problem solving skills, it's not gonna be just as simple as like, okay, I can figure this out in like 10 minutes. Let's add that to like hours. There have been plenty of times you may be a software engineer and it's gonna take you hours, sometimes days to figure out how to solve a problem. There's kind of a thing that most software engineers always say that, if you go ahead and lay down and go to sleep, the problem will solve itself in your mind while you're sleeping, and you'll wake up out your sleep trying to go to the computer to figure out like, hey, I got a different solution that I want to run with, and you'll be trying to write code late at night just so you can solve the problem that you've been struggling with all day long. So it's kind of like that, you run into those type of situations all the time. I know I have. And, again, it's just piggyback off the fact that, you need to have problem solving skills if you really want to be a software engineer. So this third one is one that I'm kind of cautious on saying, but it is true. Some people may not want to be a software engineer if they're looking for diversity. Now, when I say that, I'm meaning more so in the fact that there is a lack of diversity around tech in general, not just being a software engineer. Like for me, thankfully, the company I work for is amazing. I just want to put that out there first. There's a lot of people that look like me in my current company, but there have been companies that I've worked with in the past that there aren't a lot of people that look like me. And if you're someone who you're thinking like, okay, I'm gonna go into software engineering and I'm gonna see a lot of people that look like me, you may be, taken back when you walk in and realize that you may be the only person in the room that looks like you. At least for me, being an African-American male, there aren't that many as far as software engineers that I've ran into. There are some, but in a lot of companies, there are very few far in between. And it's even lower when you look at women. just women overall, not even just women that are African American women, but just women in general. There aren't a lot of software engineering women that I've ran across inside of tech. There are some, don't get me wrong, there are some, and there are plenty out there. But when you look across the entire board of like every single company that hires software engineers, most of the companies I work for, I don't see many. And I think it's best that you have diversity and inclusion. Now, some companies are fighting for this, and I'm super, super happy for it. But there are those other companies out there that they're just not big on diversity and inclusion. And, that's something that I feel like needs to be in tech. And I know some companies are pushing for it, but if you're just now trying to become a software engineer, you may run into that, and that may deter you a little bit in becoming a software engineer. So the fourth thing I want to bring up why you shouldn't become a software engineer is probably coding interviews. Coding interviews, overall, they suck, just being completely honest. 9 times out of 10, you're going to be doing data structures and algorithms through most of your top tech interviews. And even if you don't get a data structure and algorithm problem, you may get a general problem that causes you to have just pretty much straight up problem solving skills. You may get a problem you've never seen before. You may have to not use a data structure, but just figure out how to solve a problem. Sometimes you may get into an interview and it has nothing to do with your experience. Your experience, for the most part, just gets you the interview. Once you got the interview, now it's time to actually write some code. And if it comes down to writing some code, you may be sent to a whiteboard. Somebody may hand you a computer and be like, hey, I want you to build this. You have like an hour or 30 minutes to work out, whatever this feature is and build it for me. Or you may be sent to a whiteboard and you're asked to solve a data structure and algorithm problem. And data structures and algorithms aren't the most easiest things for some people. If you've gone to college, you've probably been exposed to data structures and algorithms. But most people that go to boot camps, or if they're self-taught, they're not always exposed to data structures and algorithms. And you'll have to go through the grind on LeetCode or HackerRank or so forth to make sure you know those data structures just so you can pass the coding interview. And it's sad to say, in most cases, the data structures and algorithms that you go through grinding to learn and master just for the coding interview, you're probably not going to use in your day-to-day job. I mean, let's be real here. I don't think in many cases, most people who are probably watching this who are in tech or they are a software engineer will probably tell you that, I haven't had to write out a tree structure. I haven't had to build a tree. I don't think no one has ever asked me to do a red and black tree or a graph or even use a linked list. I've never had to do any of that. Now, granted, underneath the hood, it is good to know those things because in many cases, you can see a problem prior to it getting there just because of the fact that okay, having a nested for loop is n squared. So, okay, that's not something I want to do in this situation. Maybe there's a better alternative versus using a nested for loop, to solve this problem I may be working on for this feature, so forth. So it's little things like that where it is helpful, but just being completely honest, you're not building a graph or a tree or a linked list on your day-to-day job. You're just honestly not. 9 times out of 10, you'll be taking some data from some backend, massaging the data, show it on the screen for the user. That's in regards to like mobile. If you're doing web development, you're definitely not trying to use any of this stuff. You're just gonna have an array of data. The data you get, you'll be trying to parse the data. Once the data is parsed or whatever, the next thing you'll be doing is trying to show the data on the screen for the users so they can interact with it or do certain things. But using the data structures and algorithms has nothing to do with your day-to-day job. So the coding interview for a lot of people is very, deterrent. It'll cause most people not to want to even get into the career because you've already gone through these hoops and hurdles just to learn how to write code. And now you mean to tell me you also got to learn data structures and algorithms that has nothing to do with your day-to-day job. Or if not even that, you could literally solve the problem, but it's not even solving the problem. You're competing against other people who solved the problem better than you did. So you may not even get the position just because of that. So it's a lot to it. And for some people, it's, very, very heavily competitive. And some people just choose not to even go that route. I mean, if you just think about it, look at the job boards. There are a lot of companies out there that are still looking for software engineers. And I'm almost positive there are plenty of people that have applied. And they're probably good enough to work at that company. But if you can't pass the coding interview, it's a wrap. You're not gonna get hired. And my fifth and last thing I wanna say is you have to know how to remain cool under pressure. So by me saying this, I'm meaning that there are gonna be many times as a software engineer, whereas you may have a crunch timeline to get something done. You may be in a position whereas, say your manager or your project manager rather, comes to you and say like, hey, we have this feature. We need to get this feature done in 2 weeks. We need you to work on it, you and your team. And you may have some late nights where you and your team work, 12 hours a day to try to get this feature out the door. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, but there are many times where you may have to work overtime, or you may have to stay late or wake up early the next day in order to get certain tasks knocked out. Overall, you are a software engineer. There may be times where you have a major crisis that's going on in production, where you may have to be on call. You may be asked to, come in to get something fixed, to get something resolved. So there's a lot more to it. So with that being said, you're gonna have to know how to remain cool under pressure. There have been plenty of times where I've had, tasks I've been working on and it's due like the next day. And I just have to remain calm and cool and have the confidence in knowing that, hey, this ticket I'm working on, it's due tomorrow at certain time, and we need to get this taken care of and that taken care of. But for me, I have the skills and the knowledge knowing and the confidence also knowing that I'll get this taken care of. Some people crack under the pressure when management is messaging you saying like, hey, what's the status of this? Where are we currently at? How's it going? Are we going to meet this deadline? We really got to meet this deadline. And for some people, they can't handle that. It is a lot. Especially if you've never been in that type of position before, trust me, it's a lot. But with that being said, you just have to know how to handle pressure. And for people who aren't great with handling pressure, I just want to say that being a software engineer may not be the best fit for you. In many cases, the pressure usually goes to, your senior engineer or so forth. But when I was a junior engineer, I definitely was getting pressure on my tickets. I couldn't take too long on working on them. If I pointed a ticket to say that, hey, it was going to take me 3 days, by day 2.5, they're like, hey, what's the status of this ticket? How long is it gonna take you? Is it in code review? Have anybody reviewed it yet? Has QA looked at this ticket yet? And if you're still in the beginning stage of working on that ticket, you haven't made any progress, you're panicking. So again, you have to learn how to handle pressure. You have to learn how to communicate effectively as well, so that pressure is taken off of you. But again, you gotta learn how to handle pressure as a software engineer. And for some people, if you're not comfortable with pressure like that, I would just highly recommend that software engineer may not be for you. This isn't to say that every company is built like this, but I'm almost positive most engineers can sit here and say they've been in pressure situations where they have to get tickets done within a specific timeline in order to meet deadlines that's, further in the future. So with that being said, I just want to thank you guys for watching the video. Again, make sure you hit the subscribe button below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.